I kind of want to start by kind of outlining the film a little bit. So tell everybody, how did you guys become a part of this film?
Well, I read about the story of what happened in Seadrift through a chapter in a book called Asian Texans, which kind of profiled all the different Asian American immigrant waves who settled in Texas. And Dr. Thao here co-wrote a chapter in the book about what happened with the Vietnamese refugees. So that's how I got intrigued about it. When you think about Texas history or civil rights history, you don't think of Asian Americans as being part of that. Sure. In 2012 now, we made our first trip down to Seadrift and connected with Diane Wilson here, who's one of the first people we met and interviewed to find out more about the story.
Nice, cool. And Dr. Thao, how did you get involved?
I grew up in Houston. I am part of the Vietnamese community, lived there since 1978. My interests have always been with my community, and so I've always written about the community. I'm gonna do some research and dig a little more and write reports and write book chapters, and so that's been my passion and interest.
Very nice.
In particular, Louis Beam, the Grand Wizard of the KKK, is a figure in the film, and I think people would be surprised to know that my father, who's Vietnamese, he and Louis Beam are friends, and so that angle, growing up, understanding or observing their relationship, also gave me. I'm like, this is weird. Let me dig into this a little bit more.
All right, Diane?
Tim reached out to me, and I am a fourth generation fisherwoman. My family's been around the area 120 years, so I know the fishermen, I know the bays, I know most of the history there. I know, like in the film, I know almost everybody in that film. And so when he asked me, he was very genuine. He was very polite, and that goes a long way down there.
Yeah,
very
sure.
polite, and he was honest about what he wanted, and I was very willing to talk with Tim there and help him all I could.
You mentioned in your press statement that you wanted to mediate both perspectives and kind of quell the rumors or speculation surrounding this incident that you're filming and talking about. In going after that mission, what did you learn that surprised you?
As I was doing research, my research is based off of newspaper reports at the time, archival news at the time, and it really did give me a skewed sort of understanding of the town of Seadrift. And really, what we've discovered through talking to Seadrift residents is that, the sort of conflicts that led up to the shooting really was a very limited, small group of people on both sides. But through sort of the reporting was made out to be really kind of this race war that affected everybody. But it was really much more limited, and racism, I think, was a part of it, but there was a lot of economic factors at play, and it was a much more complex picture than what my research led me to believe.
Did anything that Tim brought about in this film surprise either of you?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I'll let her go first.
I was very struck by the folks coming to the end of reconciliation, right? Of reflection, and allowing that time to pass and seeing the forgiveness and the let's build this together. So I wasn't surprised by that maybe, but it was really heartwarming to see that, because a lot of times when you're reading research, even if it's not news, even if it's academic stuff, we don't get into the touchy-feely.
Right.
We report what we report, and then no one talks about feelings or emotions. And so it was really nice. I was very surprised by how much emotion he was able to pull from these people and their authenticity in the way that they expressed what they were thinking and feeling at the time of the events.
Nice.
So I really loved that.
I guess the part I like best is, I've been a resident of Seadrift my entire life, and I like to think I know most of the people, but I was amazed that when I heard the Vietnamese really tell their story. Like, I've known Tsai, I bought fish from him, I bought shrimp from him, I bought boat motors from him, and that was the first time I ever heard his story.
Wow.
And it really just blew my mind, and it made me realize how important it is to have a communication, because if the people even in Seadrift had realized the background of some of the Vietnamese, there would have been a big understanding, and all it was rumor here, rumor over there, and nobody ever really knew the truth, or even now if it was the truth. And Tim brought out stuff, it's like I heard for the first time, so I was totally amazed.
Were you in Seadrift at the time of the incident?
Yes, I was in Seadrift at the time, and matter of fact, I lived, I think in the film I was talking about where the Vietnamese, when they first came and they worked at the crab plant, and there was what they call a Vietnamese village. And I think on film I call it a ratty old trailers, because they are ratty old trailers. And I was living in a ratty old trailer, and next door to me was a house with like 7 Vietnamese guys. They were all living together, and I would work outside on nets, and they were extremely curious that a woman was working on nets and knew how to build, and so I had quite a real friendship with the guys next door to me.
Documentaries are oftentimes you set out to do something. You go in with an idea if you're going to go do this, then you start to film and you start to hone a narrative, and then you get to the editing, and oftentimes they say that the best documentaries are found in the editing. So how did this film evolve during the time that you had an idea, went into it, went filming and edited, and became what it is?
Going into it, I knew just from, my sort of research and sort of talking to, Seadrift residents. But as we shot more, Beth Applin, who's Billy Joe Applin's daughter, I did not expect to get access to her. And when she finally sort of shared her very personal story to us, it really... once she shared her story, I realized I had an ending that, this is sort of at the heart of what she went through as a personal person, and sort of what the community of Seadrift were able to do as a community is sort of come to terms with what happened.
I'm standing pretty close to the place where Billy fell. He was running up this hill towards some boys over here, and he was hollering for help. He had, the best I remember from being in court, the Vietnamese had their car pulled in this way, down in the front. Billy Joe's truck was pulled in here, but it seems like his truck was a little further over than my car is. I don't know just where he was at on the first time that he was shot.
I'm curious, if you didn't get that access, did you have an ending in mind?
Well, it's a historical story,
Right.
So, the story of sort of this escalation of tensions really kind of ended with the Southern Poverty Law Center's lawsuit against the KKK.
Yeah.
That sort of took them out. So that, in some ways, that's kind of the ending, but what I was really...
Spoiler alert. Sorry.
That really is the ending to that escalation, but really it's not the ending of the story for Seadrift.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the Vietnamese did return, and eventually they're able to find a way to coexist. And so, I was real interested in trying to figure out how does a community overcome that, something that actually erupted in violence.
Now, when Tim came to you guys about this story and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this documentary," were there initial concerns for either of you that it was going to skew one way or the other? And how did he quell those concerns for you? When did you guys decide, okay, this is going to be something special?
As a person who writes very academic things, you often get people who will contact you and say, "Hey, I read your paper on this, or I read your chapter on this. Can you give me, they'll ask for some kind of request," and it never turned into this. So when Tim asked me, I thought, "Oh, yeah, sure, Tim. I can do whatever. Oh, yeah, you want to tell a story? Great. Oh, film? Okay, cool." So I never imagined this. So I had no concerns, because for me it was like, if for Asian Americans, for us to even have our stories be interested, have someone interested in our story, that was already a very wonderful feeling. So when he said film, I said, "Oh, cool, well, go forward." So I can say from my place, it was not a concern. It was more of, well, what else can you find? What can you dig a little bit deeper? Because I came in at a very limited angle, very academic. He's going to reach into the human story.
Yeah.
So I was stoked.
Nice. Yeah, cool.
Well, I can say there was a lot of reluctance from my side of it. Like for instance, I have 3 sisters and they're teachers. And matter of fact, one of them was kind of a favorite teacher of Beth. She was her 2nd grade teacher. And I know, and it's a small town, so everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, sure.
And they know who's in your mother's yard, because he came to my mother's yard, and and they immediately kind of get me in a circle and it's like, "Now, Diane, do you know what you're doing here?" Because they were, and also it's because the original story, the original press that came out, Seadrift looked like the lowest racial violent town in the whole United States, and I guarantee you people were like snake bit, and also the Vietnamese, it was like nobody wanted to get around that. And when I first met Tim, it was the first time I didn't know who he was, but he was sincere. And even when I said I would help and I gave him names and connections, I was hoping it wouldn't go south on me.
How long did you feel like it took you to win everybody over?
I did not win everybody over.
Yeah.
There's people in Seadrift that refuse to talk to us.
Sure.
We do plan to have a screening in Seadrift, and we hope we can get them to come out and actually see, the story that we were able to capture, and hopefully, spur a productive dialogue. I think people in Seadrift really, they've managed to find a way to work with each other, to coexist. But it is somewhat segregated. There isn't a lot of opportunity for the community to really come together and really talk about what happened and, sort of come to a mutual understanding. There's definitely still a lot of misinformation about what happened. Each side sort of clings to their version of events. So.
Yeah, since you did a nice job segueing me into my next question, because this happened in 1979, and in early 80s it kind of drifted into as well with trials and what have you. How is the culture today? Has there been a change, and has it been for the positive?
Diane would be the...
Well, I can definitely tell you it's a change for the better. For example, Tsai, which was in the movie, he owns one of the most successful fish house, bait houses there. And Cedar, like I said, at one, maybe 20 years ago, they had like 5 shrimp houses. There are none left anymore.
Wow.
There's a real crisis within the fisheries. But Tsai is very successful. He's very well liked. My daughter, my sisters taught his wife in school. Everybody knows everybody. And I know the Vietnamese own the crab houses. They're very successful at it. And I know there is restaurants in Seadrift, Rocky's Noodles, and people go there. There is one of the Vietnamese ladies there. She makes egg noodles and would sit down in front of the grocery store and would sell them out in half an hour. She'd have them all sold out. And there is children have married. Yeah. There has been intermarriages, and I think especially the second and third generations, and it is much better, and there's a lot more community. But I think it's like when people first saw some of the early trailers of this movie, it was like there was a few stuff on Facebook, and it was like, okay, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? So there is still this.
Yeah.
There's still this
apprehension.
Yes, but because they don't know how it will change things. Mm-hmm. And I hope it will change things.
What do you love, Tim, about being an indie filmmaker?
You get to decide sort of, once I interviewed people, it was important for me to be able to portray their stories in the right way. When you have money and deadlines, sometimes that changes things, and
sure.
You have to take shortcuts, right?
Right.
And so it took us a long time to make this film, which was really challenging. But as an independent filmmaker, I felt a responsibility to the story to tell it right. And I can make decisions to delay what I need to do, to acquire resources, to tell the story in the way that I feel like is responsible.
Nice.
To the subjects.
Nice.
So I have full control over that, which is a big responsibility. But it is something where when there's more money attached, sometimes you're sort of pulled in different directions.
So oftentimes as filmmakers, we look at our work at the end of the day. You've seen it probably 1,000 times. And you look at it and you can go, okay, I should have cut here. I should have been tighter on this shot. Oh, I wish I had gotten that coverage. But I don't want to know that from you. I want to know what you think you nailed.
It took us a long time to figure out how do we integrate Beth Aplin's story.
Ah, nice.
Because everyone else's perspective, like she was only 14 years old at the time. Her story really largely happens after the incident. So it took us a long time to try to figure out how do we integrate her story within this larger narrative. And I feel like we did a good job in sort of being able to integrate.
So one last question for each of you, and I want each of you to answer this. So where do we go from here? As an outsider, as somebody who's looking at this film from the outside, what can I do that would be helpful to bridging this gap and making this community a better community?
For me, it was easy. It was that this whole incident would not have happened if there had been a communication, a discussion, a sitting down, anything. Yeah. There was none of it. And so misconceptions, rumors, fears, they played on both sides, and both sides were scared. The sheriff barricaded the Vietnamese village, and then Beth Aplin's were barricading their houses and putting tape like you do hurricane tape. So it's this immense fear and unknown that was out there. And if anybody had thought to just sit down, explain the culture, explain the fears, and I know fishermen that would have taken the Vietnamese crabbers out there and said, here's how you put out the traps, here's how you do it, and they would have and this would have been solved, but it didn't. But you find it, you know, I saw it in Tim's film, and so to anybody who is going through this, and to Seadrift who still needs it, it's sitting down and communicating.
Very nice.
I think I'll try to answer the question in a sense of the way that this story kind of got to Tim's eyes. And that is, you know, for Asian Americans, this story is part of American history. And we don't get to have a lot of these kinds of stories told. And obviously we can learn from those stories. So I think, you know, whether it's film or any other type of media, to really start engaging this idea of finding stories from marginalized communities, marginalized voices, places that you would never think that we could have such a profound impact on something that would really matter for a larger part of society, the broader impact in society.
Nice.
Well, you know, I think today, you know, we live in a society where, you know, refugees and immigrants are being vilified and sort of blamed for economic problems. We hope the story of Seadrift really will sort of help people look at what happened in the past to sort of help evaluate, you know, how do we integrate a new refugee group? How do we make sure there's enough resources there? And really, you know, I think even though, you know, a lot of focus is on sort of the federal government and what they're doing, but a lot of times the responsibility and sort of where we can be most effective is really at the local level.
Sure.
You know, what happened in Seadrift, even though there is reconciliation, it took decades. And, you know, with the right people doing the work and with the right support, we hope that, you know, in different communities that we can help that integration and help facilitate that to a much quicker timeline.
Most of the people that lived here, that's what they did to make a living. They worked on the water.
To them, it was their livelihood that was important.
When the first Vietnamese came to Seadrift, they weren't really welcome into the community.
Our boys got killed up there fighting them, and then they brought them over here to the States.
A few came, and then a few more came, and the local fishermen resented them.
All over down the coast from Brownsville all the way to Louisiana. There was a lot of Vietnamese.
All we can do is fishing. That's all we can do. We have no skill doing this or doing that or nothing.
We heard that the government had given them money to buy their boats, put them on welfare, and gave them food stamps and this and that and the other, which nobody's done that for me.
We live here right now. We're American, but we still Vietnamese.
They should go back where they come from.
If you don't start looking out for the interests of American citizens first, this is our country.
They just want you out of there. They don't want you there.
It made it this racial thing, but I don't think that's the whole picture.
What happened, it was just a fast culture shock.
And you could just hear the engine noise. They were coming at full speed at us.
I come right close to his boat. He got a big knife out.
It just escalated and some tragic things.
He asked me, where's the gun?
We were trying to stop any violence before it happened, and we didn't succeed.